going to go ahead and get started. Thank you to everyone who's here today, and hello to our Zoom audience as well. Amanda's going to test to make sure that you all can hear perfectly fine. She'll send that in the chat. So just let us know if you can't hear anything or there's a breakup or anything. But we're really excited to be here today. So happy homecoming, and thank you, Mike, for being with us today. If this is your first time, how this is going to go, I'm going to give a brief introduction of our alumni guests, and then I'm going to engage in kind of an informal interview before we open up the floor to audience questions, and that goes for our online audience as well. Okay, so Mike Porath is the CEO and founder of The Mighty, which is the world's largest digital health community that allows people to find each other and share their experiences around their own health challenges. Before founding The Mighty, Mike graduated from William & Mary in 1997 with a degree in English and psychology, where he then went on to become an award-winning journalist and executive at a number of prestigious media outlets, including ABC News, NBC News, the New York Times, Spin Media, and AOL, where he served as the editor-in-chief. He's also a board member and a consultant for various organizations and startups in a wide range of industries. So Mike, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me here.
So just to start off, how are you doing? What's it like to be back on campus for homecoming?
It's great. It's great to see people that I have not seen in a very long time, in person versus over Zoom. So yeah, it's great, being back. I live in Los Angeles now. I could tell when I got off the plane, I felt humidity here. I have not felt that in a while. So, but it's great being back.
Great. Is there a part of campus that you always look forward to seeing, or something you look forward to doing in Williamsburg when you come back?
It's more about the people than the place, to be honest. Although I got here a little earlier than I thought, and I was strolling through campus, and there's now a coffee shop called the Daily Grind. I lived in that building for 2 of my 4 years at college. It was a small lodge, so it's just funny to see that that's a coffee shop now where I lived here.
Yeah, that's awesome.
They tore down the rest of those, sadly.
Yeah,
You
I
saw them.
Yeah, they used to have great avocado toast too. So. But yeah, I feel like saying the people is a very classic William & Mary answer. I think we all could have voted on that. But yeah, so let's start from the beginning. Growing up, what were your interests, and knowing what you know now, do you see them having shaped your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I mean, I was always interested in reading and writing. I think that's why I got into, one of my majors was English. And that's maybe not an obvious leap from English literature to, or really the liberal arts to entrepreneurship, but I have found that storytelling has really helped in terms of, as an entrepreneur, you are selling a vision, you're selling to people, you're recruiting people, based on a vision. You are selling to clients, all that, and it really does come down to how you tell a story about what you're doing, what you're building, what you're offering. And I feel like that element has really helped me in terms of what I've gone on to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. How have you seen your time at William & Mary shape your personal as well as your professional journey, maybe as it relates to entrepreneurship?
I'd say, number one, Graham and I were just talking about someone that was here a few weeks ago, Mark Decker. One is just the relationships that I formed, again, with so many people. That's I think so important. I've got great long-lasting friendships with a number of people from college. And some of those have turned into professional relationships where I've helped them or they have helped me. And so I think that's probably been, a really important aspect. But I do think my time at William & Mary was really a space and opportunity for me to learn, to be curious, to take classes that may not have been obvious in terms of where they fit. But it was, I think just having that space and, using it creatively was really helpful to me in the long run.
What was the kind of the most offset class that you took that maybe you didn't expect you would take?
I ended up taking, I had never planned a double major like with psychology. There was a professor here, Professor Neslick, I'm sure he's long gone. I ended up taking every course that he taught because he was just so good. So literally every course that he was teaching, I would just sign up for it because I learned so much in his classes. And then I realized I was 4 classes away from having a double major because, in psychology. But I think learning a whole lot about human behavior. I run a consumer-oriented, company, and you do have to think about how to how do people think, how do people behave. You test a lot of things, and some of that does come from, I think I do revert back to thinking about organizational behavior, which is kind of like a psych and business class they put together, and things like that again have been pretty helpful.
So what did you plan on majoring when essentially?
I really didn't know. I didn't know what I was going to do even coming out of college. So it was, again, I knew that I liked the creative side. I knew that I liked writing, but I didn't work at the college newspaper or any of those types of things. So I was just, trying to figure things out. At one point, my mom sent me, this was pre-email, that's how far I go back. She sent me a note in the mailbox. It was a clipping of she knew I had a lot of student loans to pay off and I was going to graduate. And it lists the average income for different majors. And English was the only one that was higher than was philosophy. And it was her passive aggressive way of saying, you're going to have to go get a job and pay off, the student loans and all that, which did help me, I think, give me a little kick in the butt to find an internship and things like that.
Awesome. So now can you kind of speak a little about your time leading up to starting the Mighty? What kind of happened in between your graduation and that time?
Yeah, so the internship that I had between junior and senior year of college was at ABC News up in New York. I applied for about 40 different internships that related to media, everything from film to newspapers, and I only got one opportunity of those 40, and it happened to be at ABC News. So I moved up there for the summer and did a unpaid internship working in a documentary unit, and that was kind of my entry point into the world of media in New York. And so the team that I worked with there was great. They just said, look, move back here after college, and when the spot opens up, it's yours. And so I did, and waited tables for a while, and then when a spot opened up, I was able to get that, and that put me in a kind of new arena. The .coms were rising back then, and that was a great opportunity. I moved over to abcnews.com, and they, I was, I think 22, and they sent me to Kosovo as a one-man band to do reporting, and it just, because they were pouring money into the internet unit, I got a lot of opportunities that I would not have otherwise. And so then I ended up moving on to similar types of roles at NBC. Joined the New York Times. I did a lot of traveling at one point in between some jobs. I did a around the world backpacking trip, and found a way to get paid by writing for newspapers during that. 9/11, happened, which was a very big moment in many of our lives. I unfortunately lost some friends that were in New York to that, and so I ended my traveling, went back to New York, and found my way into the New York Times. And so I ended up running the website for that. And along the way, I did, again, a lot of traveling, a lot of reporting, which was great. And then I found myself as editor-in-chief of AOL, and I had a large team. And so professionally, things were going great, but I have 4 kids now, but my first was born with a rare disease. And it took us a couple of years to get an actual diagnosis for her. We knew there was a lot of, she was struggling with a lot of issues. But that was a life-changing moment for us, getting that diagnosis. And what my wife and I found was that the thing that helped us most was connecting with other people. We found a lot of mentors and parents that had older children with the same rare disease. And that's really where I learned the power of community, particularly how it applies in healthcare. And so that was the impetus to start the Mighty. And I thought about it for a long time. Really, my wife's responsible for it, because she just got sick of me talking about it, about the idea behind it. And she finally, the one that was like, are you going to do this or not? And, and I was like, well, are you okay if I quit my job and do this? She was a stay-at-home mom. And at the time we had 3 kids, and since I had a 4th. And I said, yeah, well, we'll find a way, but are you okay with that? And she said, yes. And so that night is when I kind of went into full mode of, okay, we're going to do this. Without that support, I don't know that I would have made it.
Awesome. What kind of would you say was the main problem that led you to uncover that solution specifically? What are kind of other solutions you're thinking about, or how did that process?
Yeah, so again, I think that my own personal experience of really knowing the impact of the other people that were complete strangers to me, But we were bonded through having a child with the same rare disease and going through those challenges. I was really amazed by how strong those bonds were given, and I did not know these people in any way, but really found myself relying on them and forming these really special relationships with them virtually as well, because they're spread out around the world. And so I was looking for, why isn't there a large healthcare community that brought people together to solve what they were helping me solve for? And what I found was there were my idea, I think, was not all that unique, but what I saw was a lot of small health communities that were based on individual health conditions, not more broadly about anything that you happen to be dealing with. And they were generally started either by technologists, engineers who built out every feature in the world, but had a real hard time getting users, to their website or app. Or they were started by pharmaceutical marketers who knew how to make money off of health communities, but really weren't in it to help people. And I thought that those communities were kind of crap in terms of, I didn't get any help at all from joining any of those. So I just felt like there was a really large space, a white space, where I could build a health community that was really designed for people and could scale into something much larger. And I would figure out how to make money at some point along the way.
So, and how did you leverage your previous experience in media within like the health and wellness field in the startup area?
So I was not, I think, particularly good at a lot of things, but the one thing that I had going for me was, driving audience on websites and using content to bring people together. And I had done that, at many of the media companies that I worked for. And so that was kind of my superpower at the beginning, was like, I know that aspect. So I hired a woman at a Huffington Post that a friend connected me to, and we started it together. And within 3 or 4 months of just doing 3 stories a day, we got up to about 500,000 readers a month. And so that was I brought to the table. There's a lot of things I didn't, and I had to hire a lot of people, to help with, but that is the part that I really knew how to kind of get things going. And I also kind of innately understood from my own experience, with raising my daughter, the things that helped me were content that were personal stories. There's lots of places that you can get medical information. I didn't try to compete with that. I felt like the human side of what people are going through, the isolation that they feel, that they're often scared, they feel alone, they feel lost, and just trying to navigate this new thing, this new journey that they're on. And I really felt like the human aspect of that was missing from a lot of the content that I saw. So we started with personal stories, real people, real experiences, and we leveraged social networks where Facebook was sending a lot of traffic to that type of content. And so it was just figuring out that aspect, and then eventually raising venture capital along the way, where when you can show that level of traction that we did early on, that started the process of bringing investors on. And we've since raised over 20 million in venture capital money, which I just think of as milestone funding, which is, you say this is what you're going to do, you raise money for it, and you better deliver the results. And if you do, chances are you'll be able to raise the next round and the next round to continue to grow. But that was kind of the path that I was on.
Awesome. Now, obviously, there's a lot of improvisation and a lot of like openness to risk, opportunity discovery within your story. But looking retrospectively, is there anything that you wish you had leveraged at William & Mary that maybe you didn't when you were there, that you think could have helped you kind of in your entrepreneurial journey?
So this place would have helped me, but it didn't exist back then. We had a very small career center, and I remember going there looking for help, and it wasn't particularly helpful when I was there. They had some books where I found addresses to send, internship applications. That was really it. I think I always had entrepreneurial instincts along the way, and different things that I did. I got suspended in high school because I started a little trying to make $5 on little gambling cards. People would pick NFL games, and I was like, I guess that was entrepreneurship, back then. But I always was, I think I had that instinct, but there was nothing at the time at William & Mary that really helped with that. I found, I was drawn to a number of other, different things at the time. So I think it came less out of here, but it was more going forward, and then just finding a problem that I wanted to solve. I know, like, I feel like I'd have a really hard time being an entrepreneur if I were just selling widgets. If it's something that I didn't care about, you have to feel like it's worth your time and energy, because, to build, a venture, to build a company takes so much, and I wouldn't want to put that much time and sacrifice that much for something that I didn't feel like was actually helping people in some meaningful way.
Yeah. So now, based on what we've heard so far, which one of our pillars of entrepreneurial thinking that you can see on the wall do you want to work on leveraging more, and why? And for our online audience, Amanda's going to send those in the chat so you can see them.
All right, so I see openness to risk, opportunity, discovery, tolerance for ambiguity, failing wisely, grit, improvisation, self-direction, and collaboration. So I'd say that the parts that I started with, and I'd say I was good at, was the grit and self-direction. I think that to grow the company that I have now into something much bigger, it's the collaboration and the probably failing wisely. We're doing a number of tests now to try to figure out, well, I don't want to get too deep into it, but I'm trying to work with the team on being much more, to experiment a whole lot more and do it as quickly as we can so we can learn what works and what doesn't. But the collaboration is so important. I was a solo founder in building a company, and there's pros and cons to that. And I think I was probably too slow in hiring really good people that do very different things than I do, that can complement what I'm good at. And as we're growing the company and they're moving into different revenue lines and things like that, I'm looking for more partners to kind of do that with, build the executive team out. And so I think that collaboration aspect is really important for where I and the company are at right now.
Great. So I think we're in a really good place to start there and open up to a Q&A. So, excuse me. Our online audience, you're welcome to throw anything in the chat or raise your hand, and we can get your video up on the screen so you can ask Mike your question. And then for our in-person audience, you can just raise your hand. I can come pass the mic to you. You can introduce yourself and ask your question.
Just take this one.
We have
There's another one.
We have this fun.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Toss it.
Is it working? Yeah, it's working. So I'm so curious about that night when your wife said, "Are you gonna just keep talking about this, or are you gonna do it?"
Yeah.
And then you said, "I'm gonna do it."
Yeah.
What did you do that night? Like that first night, like what was that like?
We came up with the name that night.
The name.
Yeah. So
And was it this name?
it was almost the same. So we knew the idea because she'd heard me talk about it for years, and I had continued to talk to other people that kind of build more of this. I approached it like a journalist would, in terms of going out and trying to like solve all the problems and understand the whole just the area of health community and all that, and where I saw the gaps. I didn't feel like the humanity was brought forth in a lot of those. And so I wanted to come up with a name that was not disabilitiesanddiseases.com, because I didn't think that would work. And so I knew that I wanted a name that was aspirational and not literal. I knew that I wanted a name that I felt like people would want to be a part of. They'd want to wear a t-shirt, with it. I don't see many people wearing a WebMD, t-shirt around. And I wanted it to be a brand that I didn't know honestly how we were going to make money, but I figured we'd be partnering with companies in the healthcare space. And so I wanted a brand and a logo, name and a logo that I felt like a Johnson & Johnson would spend, $5, $10, $20 million with one day. And so that was like the name that I was looking for. And so my wife and I started by talking about all the experiences with our daughter that were positive. You hear about all the negatives. You can imagine a lot of the negatives of raising a daughter with a rare disease who's autistic and has all kinds of different challenges. But there's also so many amazing, joyful things that happen along the way. So we started sharing stories about all of those like amazing experiences we had, and then we wrote down words that described a lot of that. And then so there's probably 30 words, and we bucketed them into 3, which were strength, joy, and courage. And then it was coming up with a name that brought those 3 words together. And I mentioned Mighty, and she's like, I really like that. And so I literally went on GoDaddy.com and I just started looking for names that had Mighty, and I bought one for $10 that was mightyproud.com. And then I sent it around to, I don't know, 30 or 40 friends, and a couple came back and they said, this, it sounds like it might be a site for, for gay or homosexual people, the pride word. I'm like, oh, I hadn't thought about that at all. That could be a great site, but that's not the one I'm building, right? And so ended up spending, it seemed like a ton of money at the time, $3,500 to buy the mighty.com. And it was a good investment, certainly in the long run. But that was, all of that happened the first night. I was like, okay, what's the name of this going to be? And that's what we did.
That's incredible. But that's your English major, like coming to full
Yeah.
force
Yeah.
that night. That's the most thoughtful naming story I've ever heard.
Yeah. So
That's incredible.
Great. Other questions?
Oh, you got it.
I almost got you there. Yeah, almost took out Neha. So what was the scariest part? You wake up the next day, you had the name, or maybe you've made this investment, $3,500.
Yeah.
So you at least have that. What is it like continuing the process from at least having that domain and now actually starting the fundamentals of the business? What was the scariest parts of that?
So the first thing I did was actually not focus on the business. The first thing I did was find some consulting gigs so that I had an income, so that I could put more time and energy into it. So I did leave the job that I had, which was working in media, and I felt like I couldn't really do both of those at the same time. But I found some consulting gigs that certainly, helped pay the bills while I was starting this. I didn't pay myself for the first year, so I needed, we needed some kind of income. But after that, it was a matter of I went out, I took a lot of people out for beers, and just talked to them around, like, one person was the chief technology officer, and I don't have an engineering background, so talking to him about how to get this started. I think it started as a website, and I thought that would make sense, not as an app. We'd eventually add an app later, but talking through how to do this, talking through someone who knew the ins and outs of Facebook and social media, someone who had worked on my team at a previous company, a number of different people, talking to them. And what shocked me was they all were willing to help out. They didn't want to just have a conversation. The CTO that I worked with for 4 years with opened up to me that night as we were having beers talking about it, and said that he hadn't let a lot of people know, but his wife was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And so he was going through that, trying to help her. I went home that night, and I didn't have a job at the time. So the next morning, I spent 8 hours trying to find the best content on the internet around schizophrenia that I thought would help, Matt, the CTO. And I sent him the top 10 links that I thought would be, helpful. And he was blown away. He was like, one of them was a link to an Australian, public broadcast video on YouTube that had less than 1,000 views, but it was so good. And he's like, how did you find this stuff? I'm like, I just kept searching, right? And he's like, immediately, he's like, all right, he's like, I'm giving you 60 hours of my time for free because I want to help get this thing off the ground. And versions of that happened across for a lot of different people that wanted to, be helpful. And then I was in talking about our first hire. I was in New York. I was doing a speaking gig at the Wall Street Journal. And the night before, I went out with an old buddy of mine, and who ran a large division at Huffington Post. And he told me, I was telling him about the idea, and he goes, "This is great." He goes, "I know the woman that's going to help you build this." And he's telling me about this woman who worked on his team, was an intern there, and done all the reasons why she was so great. And I'm like, well, I'm flying out at 11 tomorrow. Like, when am I going to meet her? He goes, "Come to the office." She's there by 8 in the morning. So she had no idea. I go into Huffington Post. I meet this woman. She doesn't know who I am. We sit down. We talk about the idea, and I ended up hiring her 2 weeks later. And so she was our first employee, and she was willing to take, checks out of my savings account, which is how I paid her. No health insurance, just to kind of get started. And that's, the amount of trust that you need to build quickly between two people. I'm like, I'm going to keep paying you. We're going to figure out how to do this. And she had that entrepreneurial, instinct also to kind of get it going. But all of those things happened because of previous relationships that I, built. And so, this is a long answer to a short question, but it was finding people that could help me build it. I didn't try to do it alone because I couldn't.
Awesome.
I got one. Was there ever a moment where you thought it might not work? And if so, like what was that and how did you overcome that?
So that happens daily. I'm serious, like you ride so many highs and lows on this. I'd say on a daily basis, there are reasons to believe that this won't work. But every day, there's also reasons to believe it can become a massive, company and have a, massive impact on a lot of people. And so I feel like you ride those waves literally like on a day-to-day basis. There have certainly been times when it looked like we were close to the end. I sold my house at one point because I thought it would give us a couple months of payroll. I didn't end up needing that, but at the time, it was not the house we were living in. It was, we were renting it out after we moved to Los Angeles. But still, it was like, hey, this will help us, get to where we need to get to. But that's matched by so many amazing moments where it's like, hey, this thing is really, taking off. And it's now about a 50-person company, and it's doing really well. We're, doubling revenue year over year. Growing our member base. We have millions of members who are sharing experiences and all of that. So I think we're in very good shape now. But there's definitely been moments where things aren't working. A key employee leaves, where you're just you're devastated because this person, you put so much time and energy into this person, and you get it, like they're off to, it's not their baby, it's your baby, and so those things can be really challenging. But it's generally like when COVID hit, we lost the largest partnerships that we had at the time, revenue producing partnerships. And nobody knew what was going to happen. Our main revenue line is around content marketing and advertising, with healthcare companies. And the first thing most of them did was they cut their marketing budgets because they didn't know what was going to happen either. And so that was a really difficult moment when it was like, okay, we could tear up our budget, our forecast for 2020. I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's definitely not going to look like what we were planning for. And then, what moves do you make? Do you get really aggressive? Do you get really conservative? There's, you have to make decisions. You can't avoid the decision making, but you also know that you're probably going to make a lot of poor decisions. You just don't know which ones they are. But you just have to make, decisions. I have so much empathy for other entrepreneurs going through it. You can look back and say, oh, this company was mismanaged. This didn't work. I look at it and I'm like, well, what decisions were they facing and what were their options? And, they were trying to, no one was trying to make something fail. It's not easy. And so you make the best, most informed decisions you can. Where I think you get into trouble is when you avoid making any decision at all.
Great. Other questions?
So I'm curious, obviously this is a company that's set out to help a lot of people and allow them to connect with one another. Do you have a favorite story about an impact that the business has made and just one that really impacted you or something like that?
I have a lot of them, but I'll boil it down to one that's right off the top of my head. There's a woman named Jody Betty who's a writer for our site. We have close to 15,000 writers now who submit content that we publish, in addition to all the user-generated content that's made. And she's up in Canada, and she wrote several stories for the Mighty. One of them was about, it was a letter to people who were considering suicide. So a very heavy story, and it was a letter basically why they should hold on. And so, we publish a story and we look at Google Analytics to see the traffic on these different stories. And this one, we just start noticing every day it's increasing the number of views, getting up to 10,000 views every day. And so one person on the team, actually, I was like, well, where's this traffic coming from on the story? And he dug into it and he realized that most of the traffic was coming from people typing the words into Google, I want to die. And that's the story that would pop up for them. And 10,000 times a day, that was happening. And if you look at the hundreds and hundreds of comments on that story, you scroll through them, you see comments like, thank you, you saved my life. which was just, amazing. And so I've since gotten to know, Jody. This was just a woman who had, lived with, a mental illness and who was trying to give back in some ways. She got so much out of being a writer for us that she changed her career and she became a trauma coach and started connecting with, a number of these different people. We ended up using her story and many others in doing work with a research team at Harvard that they were fascinated by how open people on our platform were about sharing, about their suicidal thoughts and things like that. And this study I just heard last week is going to be published now. And the great news is they're able to show now that, kind of a daily dose of the mighty is significantly reducing suicide ideation among people who have suicidal thoughts. And so it's this idea that, having other people open up allows you to kind of deal with a lot of those things. Not dissimilar from like an AA group, right? Which it may be hard to talk about your issues, but if you're in a circle with, 10, 12 other people and other people are opening up about it, it's a lot easier to do it yourself. And so that's, that's one story of just like how it came full circle. Like I love that I really underestimated the impact that we would have on the people that were writing the content, right? Just how therapeutic it became for them to do that. I was not looking at that aspect when we were building.
That's really incredible. Thank you for that.
Any questions? Any other questions?
Although I feel like it's unworthy after that one.
I'm gonna try to tie like what you just said to the question that I actually had. When you mentioned that all in, I think you raised 20 million. The original question was, do you remember what those initial milestones were for the first round? What were you trying? What were the metrics that mattered back then? And how are they different today?
Yeah.
And does any of what you just shared factor into the metrics that matter today?
So the metrics, if you look at our different pitch decks along the way, you would not recognize them as the same company. It goes to kind of I think the point of the question, which is how much the organization changes over time. At the beginning, we started with a simple WordPress website, and it was just pure content, right? We started as a publisher because honestly, that's what I knew. That was my background. And then I think over time, we recognized that if we're really trying to connect people, and they were asking to connect with, we get people saying, hey, can I have the email address of that writer? And it was like, well, should we come up with a better way for you to connect with that person if you guys are both members of this community? So we evolved it from being more of a publisher into more of a social network. And now we're in the process of actually turning it into much more of a healthcare data platform. What we didn't know along the way, even about 2 years ago, 2.5 maybe, we discovered that we were sitting on an incredible amount of valuable data. We could look and see, run machine learning across 20,000 posts in something like bipolar disorder. And you strip away the profile information. We're not selling any personal data or any of that. So you strip that away, but you just run a machine learning method across all of that content, and you can actually pull some really interesting insights from that. So I started with a team of creatives that were more of the writers and editors. Then we built a team that was more about product and technology in terms of building this as more of a social network. And then it was a matter of building out over the last year or two, like healthcare data and research in a world, frankly, that I'm not familiar with. I'm actually looking now for a partner in the company that comes out of that space because it's not what I know, particularly well. But it's, we're helping companies get a much better understanding of what people are actually dealing with in a space now called real world evidence within healthcare, which I'd never heard of 2 years ago. But that's the big opportunity right now. And so the company absolutely changes over time. Metrics at the beginning were about views of content, essentially.
Yep.
Now it's much more about active members of the community and them participating. But it's also around all the data collection we do, surveying. We during COVID, we asked hundreds of questions to the community. We got back 1.3 million answers to those questions from people in our community, and that helped drive research. We had research partners, Mayo Clinic, UCLA, many others. It helped a lot of our clients better understand what people with, how COVID was impacting people with certain health conditions, things like that. But that over time works because you build trust, in our case with consumers is building that trust. That's honestly the cornerstone of everything that we built. And I tell our investors, it's our biggest risk factor is if we violate that trust in some significant way. That's the biggest risk factor we have as a company.
So based on what you just said, as you transition into this more data-driven aspect of your business model, speak to a little bit of the risk factors there about the trust, if you could.
So I think what we have to do is, number one, is be very transparent about what we're doing. Make sure it's clear to everyone that we're not in any way selling their personal, information. That we aggregate all the data, we identify all of the data. But I think most importantly, though, in addition to being transparent, what's really important is that that data should have value to the members, not just the clients. So we did something, there's a health condition called fibromyalgia. And we did a survey around fibromyalgia that went out, and we had 14,000 people answer a 45-question survey about their own experiences living with fibromyalgia. And so that, we didn't have a client for that. We just thought, hey, we could actually turn this into a great, we call them condition guides. So that if, and we want to share all that data, we crunch the data in a number of different ways, and we can show them things like, the average person has to see more than 3 different doctors to get an accurate diagnosis of fibromyalgia. So people are reading that being like, okay, I don't feel like, so bad now that I've had to see several different doctors, or here's the type of medications that are helpful to different people within different, ages and things like that. And that's not that we're prescribing that, but that could be good information that they could take back to their doctors. So, but if we can use the data and the insights that we get from that data in a way that's actually helpful to the members, I think that a lot of those issues become, less important. And again, it's we're not selling anyone's data. We're gathering insights from looking at large data sets, and we're delivering those back to members of our community as well as to clients that are really ultimately trying to find ways to better serve patients. That's what their job is in the long run.
Actually, I have another question. I don't really know how to draw insight from it, but I'm curious what your transition was like from being the editor-in-chief of a really established institutional type place, and then being still kind of the boss, but at a place that's much operates very differently. What did that look like for you?
So I had to come to terms with the fact that I had to do a lot of parts of the job that I didn't like. And as an editor-in-chief, that was fun. CEO is not, founder CEO is not necessarily fun. There's certainly times when it is, but I'm not drawn to spreadsheets, and I have to spend quite a bit of my time in spreadsheets, right? That's just not what I love, but there's aspects to the job that's important. Modeling out what I think is going to happen, the hires we need to make, the revenue that's, we're projecting, all those things. I have team members that help with that, but I still have to make decisions. I have to understand, what we're doing around those things, which aren't the reason I got into building. So there's a lot of aspects that I think are, more challenging around that. Again, as I said before, you can't avoid making decisions, and you don't always have all the information you'd like to have before making a decision. So those are, not always easy. I do think, though, it's really fulfilling if you build something that you are passionate about. My kids, they're always asking us to sponsor their T-ball teams or whatever with Mighty jerseys, and it's pretty cool to see a bunch of 7-year-olds run out on a baseball field wearing the logo from your company, and the Mighty's a great baseball name anyway. So there's also really cool elements like that where you see those things and you're like, it's cool to see that there's impact on on the family side and things like that as well. And I will say that over time, I had no idea this when I was at William & Mary. I had no idea this, frankly, 5 years ago. But just the process that I've gone through, the journey that I've been on, has helped me realize that in anything that I do, certainly with the Mighty, but I think about this in terms of lessons for my kids as well. Like if we had a family crest, there'd be 3 words on it, and it would be dream, build, and serve. And I think there's an aspect of entrepreneurs where it's like you have a vision for what you want to see changed. And that can be a small change, it can be a massive change. But you have to take the time to figure out you have to be intentional about what you actually want to accomplish. And that's one really important aspect. And then the building part is where like the day-to-day grind comes in. And that's that selling the vision to people joining the company, to partners, to clients, to investors. You are a salesperson if you are an entrepreneur, or at least if you're going to be a successful one. You're constantly selling. And that doesn't mean just making money. That means selling a vision, recruiting, all of those things. And it's that building process that is not easy. It takes the grit, the persistence, those types of things. And then the serve part is, I think the most successful companies and the ones that I want to build are doing things in the service of others. And I actually think you can be more successful that way because it's easier to get people to join your company if they buy into what your mission and purpose is. It's easier to win clients over. It's just, there's so much goodwill around a company that has a mission or a purpose that people can really get behind. And I would like my kids to see lessons, and all of that, and to pick up. There are different skill sets in terms of dreaming and vision versus the actual work that goes into building. But I think successful founders who continue on as CEOs and build significant companies that impact a lot of people, they figure out those skills along the way. They gain those skills along the way, and I'm trying to do everything I can to do the same.
That's awesome. Do you have any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. That was a really great conversation.